Alright, response video to the Modern Mystic again. Reaction video, whatever. I don't know, he doesn't really respond to videos. There's no consistency in it anyway. So he did a video basically doing this simplistic comparison crap between capitalism and communism. And he, of course, used the Russian model as if that's the model of whatever communism would be. And he even suggested that it failed economically. You know, that its failure didn't have something to do with a huge pile of political rubbish that was piled on top of that communist system that had to do with oppression of rock and roll and maintaining borders and wars and the CIA and giving Al-Qaeda weapons and all kinds of other crap that was piled on to that experiment. And, you know, that's just such a cliche. You know, he's just talking like a politician now. Let's just, you know, spout the rhetoric, the complete perversions of reality and history, and call that an argument. So it was really weak and thin and silly. Alright, so anyway, let's just say we have a controlled system at one extreme and a completely free system at another extreme. Now, we don't have examples of either one of those. You know, a certain extreme, like where one individual controls everything in the economy. He decides everything, almost like what every person does, how they do it, how the businesses are run, who runs them. Just one dictator who's just in everything. You know, at least controls everybody who is in control. I would argue that theoretically that's just fine if you got the right person. I'm quite confident I could run the world economy and make it all ethical and great, because I would just hire people that are ethical and great. I'd force them all to take lie detector tests. They couldn't run a company if they didn't take a lie detector test. You know, I would put in mechanisms that oblige people to do their fucking job. And I'd cut their heads off. Yeah, there'd be a law. You get your head cut off if you're caught stealing. Okay, it's that simple. Just make it draconian and harshly brutal and simple, and just say, this is the fucking rule of the game. You can't play by the rules of the game, you're not going to play in the game. The fucking end. And I'm sure I could make it work. And everybody'd be 5 times richer, 10 times richer maybe. Everybody's life would be hugely better. You know, we'd have a cure for cancer tomorrow. Yeah, I'm sure of it. I'm sure I can make this thing run fucking super fantastic. You know, maximize the incentives, give the people who earn the money the fucking goddamn money, and give the other assholes who think they're entitled a good slap in the fucking head and just say, look, here's some cyanide, okay? You don't want to play, you don't want to do your job, you don't want to be a contributor, get the fuck out of here. You know, you're not going to just sit around and ride on other people's backs, you motherfucking cunt. Yeah, that'd be pretty harsh, but it'd be good for people who work. It'd be good for people who want to be part of a society, who want to help other people and want other people to care about them. Be very good for that kind of human being. Otherwise, fuck you. So yeah, that would be a controlled system. So we don't have that, right? There's nobody doing that anywhere. And a free system wouldn't be anything like the capitalism we have now. A free system, your wages would be 50 cents an hour everywhere in the world. Because there's a surplus of labor. That's just a fact. People do not have children at the same rate the economy grows, and so, you know, labor would always be at a huge disadvantage, and they would be completely exploited by the owners. So that's just a given. And you know, there's all the other extremes you can think of. I mean, the people who got hugely wealthy would just drive everybody else out of business because they could always afford to lose money for 10 years. So they could dump in a market like the Chinese did with steel or some other kind of game, and they could just drive everybody out of business, just like Google did. Google gave it away for free for 2 years. They drove everybody out of business, out of the search game, and now they own the internet, basically. And that's the game that would be played with free capitalism. It would be, in 10 years, if you had real open market free capitalism, in 10 years all you'd have is the king. The king would be back. There would be 10 families that own the entire world, the fucking end. And there would be, everybody else would just live on the outskirts of the palace and be moat food. You know, that's all they'd be. You know, they couldn't own any enterprise because it'd all be the king's property. Everybody would be renting everything. rent your bread. You'd rent a job. You'd have to pay to have a job even. So yeah, it would just horribly suck. So yeah, you can't do either one of those things. It's not going to happen. So we have this thing in the middle. And so let's talk about the thing in the middle. Let's talk about what regulation is good and what regulation is bad. That's the conversation that needs to take place. So let's talk about corporations maybe. Let's talk about bankruptcy. Let's talk about inheritance. Let's talk about how much waste there is in letting all these for-profit greedy fuckers control investment. Nick talked like, oh yeah, these investor guys really do us hold. Yeah, their incentive is to serve the customer. No, their incentive is to make a profit. That's where they invest their money. If you're a venture capitalist, you got $5 million in the bank to play with. You're not going to invest your money in a guy who's making 2% a year. You're going to invest your money with a guy who makes 22% a year. And that's just a fact. So somebody's going to have to be ripping the customer's ass off for you to invest in them. And that's how this corporate crap runs, Nick, and you know it. And so this is just all a pile of turd. To call this the democratic choice or something, it sucks, but it's better than all the options. Well, bullshit, especially as this has been formed. So why do we have this thing? Why do we have these corporations that have immunity from being responsible for the messes they make? They can, we're bankrupt. Even though we have all these stockholders who finance the game we're playing, like Enron is a good example. A bunch of people made a whole pile of money basically financing a pyramid scheme. And they all bail out, and they all say, I didn't do it. No, they all did it. Okay? And they all should be held responsible for what the fucking goddamn mess they made. And it should come out of their fucking goddamn ass. It's a real debt, and they should pay it. Why should the fucking consumer pay for their pyramid scheme? The game the rich played, their little risk-taking bullshit. There was no risk at all. So that's just the contrivance, this fake capitalism where these fucking rich people say, I'm a risk-taker. No, afraid not. You're a risk-taker when you take full responsibility for the fucking ruin you create, the empty warehouses that are built because our company went bankrupt. Fortunately, I still own 3 other companies. No problem. That's the other thing, these holding companies, that they own 5 competitors in a market. Say there's a market and there's 10 competitors. They own 5 of them. Don't you see any kind of horrible monopoly influences in that? The deals that are made, even in distribution, it still goes on, even though it was talked about 20 years ago about how these companies make deals with the food chains and say, look, put our shit on the shelf, keep that other guy off the shelf, put him in the back room, to never put more than 4 cans of his stuff on the shelf at one time. All these fucking games that these fucking the big providers can play. These cheats in this fucking capitalism, in this free market that isn't free. How come a cable bill, you can't buy anything a la carte? No, you got to finance a bunch of sports, and you got to finance a bunch of moronic, insipid nonsense to even get the service. You can't get the service brought to your fucking house unless you finance content you have absolute contempt for. Where the fuck's the freedom in that market? There's no freedom. And so the only way you would get freedom is if you had regulation that said you can't do that. You can't force somebody to pay for content they have contempt for. Subsidize. I would argue that if you add up all the waste of the bankruptcies alone, how many businesses wipe out another business, that business has a ton of debt and they never pay it, and so the banks have to pay it or somebody else has to pay it, and then you end up having to pay the banks for what, their losses, so you're going to have to pay for those losses. One way or another, they're not going to pay taxes on their losses, they're going to deduct it, so you're going to have to pay more taxes to make up the difference. So one way or another, you're going to pay for every one of those ruined businesses. Every single one of them. There's no free lunch here. And all this talk about, competition is great. And no, it's not great. Because every time you do that, every time you have an empty warehouse, that's pyramid, another pyramid on the landscape, another pile of nothing, wasted labor. And there's a huge amount of that in this stupid competition game. And think about how the competition goes. Companies will fight with each other, and you'll do okay for a while as long as there's competition in the market, and so the companies will have to lower their margins and just kind of scrape by. But then a Google will pop along, give it away for free, wipe out the competition, and then they'll just soak you for a decade or more. The AT&T example, even. Exxon. I mean, these big companies are soaking you. Okay, you're not, and that's just the way it is. That's what capitalism will do. So, but there's huge waste in that feast and famine kind of thing, where yeah, okay, the consumer does really well for a short period of time, and then he gets killed for a long period of time. It's nothing. There's no good in that waste. Huge friction. And let's not even get into the fact that unlike a public library, compare a public library and its provision of service to any business that's in the world. I mean, it just that example works. All right, no strong union running it. You finance it, you even get people to do some volunteer work for it, and it works. And if we provided services, more other services with that model, where it's sort of separate for government, but it's not separate. It's subsidized. That works. And this corporate crap has huge waste in it. You're obligated to pay for all the shysterism, all the game playing, all the manipulations, all the dishonest behavior. Yeah, door blew open. Anyway, you have to tie these together. So it's all, there's so much waste in the free market system because its incentives aren't to serve people. It's to steal from people. That's the primary incentive. And you got to look at things like, even there's, as a practical matter, unless you're going to say let's go all the way to free markets and completely abolish government control of anything, then what are you going to do about this taxation thing and healthcare and all this other stuff? You're not going to have any of that crap. And if you do have it, then you have to have tax rates that if the rich are taxed lower at a lower rate, money on ownership, wealth generated on ownership is taxed at a lower rate than actual physical work. Over time, that imbalance is going to just make the rich richer and the poor poorer, and that's exactly what we've done. And that's the model of this capitalism. This is a democracy. And so, yeah, even his use of the word democracy, we don't even have real democracies, representative democracies. I've never had a congressman in my life. Okay, I mean, I live in the biggest, greatest democracy in the history of mankind, and I've never had a representative in the Congress in my life. I've had Adolf Hitler representing me in the Congress, because he's been able to steal my representation, because we do this stupid geographic-based, idiotic election system that unless you're ideologically segregated, unless all the people for abortion are in one state, all the people against it are in another state, all the people for marijuana rights is in one state, and all the people against it is another state, you don't have any fucking representation, because ideology doesn't have fucking state borders. Philosophical ideology. My philosophy isn't represented. The only thing represented is my physical body in a geographic location. I'm not represented. Anything that means anything to me is not represented. So let's not talk about democracy until we fix those kind of things. Because we don't even have a democracy, a real one. Yeah, I mean, look, if you had real capitalism, again, you wouldn't have any. There wouldn't be any wage protections. It would just be a horrific mess. And so it's just silly to call capitalism the great hope of democracy, because it's going in the opposite direction. It is the worst kind of oppression in the end, liberated completely. And at least with a controlled system of some kind of rationally controlled system, where you just don't let people show up to the race and say, my kid gets he gets a head start. Why? Oh, I have a document that says we are elitist blue blood motherfuckers, and we're better than you. So in any contest we ever play on planet Earth, my kids get a head start. That's what we've created a system that ludicrous, that preposterously ludicrous. And Nick calls it what humans want. That's what we want. We want a fucking system that is overtly, not subtly, overtly by elitist declaration unfair. Preposterously unfair, quite deliberately, quite overtly. And he says that's what intelligent human beings think is going to be the right solution. No, I think assholes think that's the right solution. Yes, morons have been sold that by lying capitalists. And then Nick wants to put himself on that bandwagon. So Nick's put his little smiley face on the image of capitalism and said, yeah, I sell this too. Okay? I sell this cheaty, unfair, silly lie to people. And you'll offend me if you hold me responsible for that. If you say, "Oh, Nick, I'm gonna make you accountable," because that's what you're selling. You're selling poison to people. That's what you're doing, and I'm gonna call you fucking on it. And you don't like it? Well, too fucking bad. But that's what you put your face on. When you compare capitalism to fucking democracy, fairness. I mean, democracy attempts to create fairness, at least. That's the ideal. We haven't finished the ideal. We haven't completed it. We need a second revolution, just to do the last 20% of the game. The instant runoff voting, the other little mechanisms that'll fix it. Yeah. But to compare your greed cheat system with democracy, I have a right to find that offensive because it's inconsistent with any piece of logic you can put together. I defy you to logically defend unfairness as a principle. Yeah, good luck, fucker.